All right, going back to the main part of the book, let me requote what I said a moment ago. Was Egypt an established nation in Genesis chapter 2? Or how about Assyria? Historically, they were not. So how could they be in the Garden of Eden and during Ezekiel's day? That is, how can Egypt and Assyria be in the Garden of Eden and be in Ezekiel's day, which is many years after Adam and Eve? But I've got another explanatory note for that. For, again, how could they be in the Garden of Eden and during Ezekiel's day? Even though Ezekiel truly said that Assyria was in Lebanon, from Ezekiel chapter 31, verse 3, I'm trying to show herein that the Garden of God was not located at any geographical location, nor stuck at just one spot on the earth. But, and as I'm going to continue to paint a quick picture of, Eden's garden was simply God's work on earth with anybody or of any nation that he was presently working with, his vast kingdom on earth. And before I go any further with this, I want to say once again that the book that I am currently working on right now, actually finishing up, I'm just doing the last minute editing of it on Adam and Eve. I'm going to expand a lot further on what I'm saying here, that the world itself was a global garden. Okay, just what people talk about the Garden of Eden naturalistically, the entire planet was like that. But the Garden of Eden itself, that we don't see until Genesis chapter 2, because remember, God created the world and all this beauty in chapter 1. Then all of a sudden, we got this garden pop up in chapter 2. I'm going to show in that book how that the garden that Adam and Eve were placed into was placed into them. Was a spiritual garden. It had nothing to do with natural greenery at all. And that's what I'm kind of saying very quickly right here. But again, please stay tuned for that book. Hopefully I'll have it out by next month. I'm hoping that it'll be published. But I'll get into great detail about the Garden of Eden. Necessarily in a book like that I have to. But let's continue here. Also, and we must consider that if this is only the garden of Adam's day, that is, that Ezekiel talked about, which Ezekiel was mentioning, I said that there, then what other nations would have been living in there with him and Eve at the time? I ask this because of what else Ezekiel says. Let's see this again. Ezekiel 31, 8 through 9. The cedars in the garden of God could not hide him. The fir trees were not like his boughs, the chestnut trees were not like his branches, nor any tree in the garden of God was like unto him in his beauty. I have made him fair by the multitude of his branches, so that all the trees of Eden that were in the garden of God envied him. Now, just who or what were these other trees? No, we cannot say that they were just natural trees, even though it did say cedars, firs, and chestnut trees. For again, Ezekiel had already explained that Assyria was a cedar tree itself. As he says in Ezekiel 31, 3a, behold, the Syrian was a cedar in Lebanon with fair branches. Therefore, surely, Ezekiel is painting a picture, metaphorically, for us that the trees in the garden of God, whether in Adam's day, his own children, in Adam and Eve's day, it was his own children and grandchildren. Those were the other trees in the garden. Again, I'm going to explain that in my book coming up on Adam and Eve. Or even in Ezekiel's day, it was other nations besides Assyria and Egypt. It's people. It was nations. It was cities. So there were not natural trees at all here. It's metaphorically understood. Either being individual people or being whole nations. This is what these trees are that it's talking about. So let's not look at this just so naturalistically. So let's take a moment to consider that the Garden of Eden itself might not have been a natural garden. I just talked about that a moment ago. Could the garden have been just another metaphor? Is that impossible? Now remember, a metaphor doesn't necessarily mean just a good idea or some moralistic lesson. Sometimes something that can be metaphoric can be just as real and literal as a natural counterpart, but just be spiritual. See, I explained that even about the inner man. The inner man to me is not just a new way of looking at things. It's an actual body that forms inside of us that we will occupy when we physically die. I mean, we're going to have a body when we live with God, but it don't mean it's a natural body. But it can be a metaphorical comparison to the natural body of something that we don't completely understand. Anyways, then how can we explain the garden, if it were natural, to have survived the flood of Noah so that Egypt and Assyria could be a nation to dwell within it? But that would also mean that the garden, if natural, had stretched out for many, many miles. However, Noah's flood destroyed the entire face of the earth. We see that in 2 Peter 3:6, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. The world perished. So if the flood of Noah completely destroyed the surface of the earth, which scientifically can be proven, I got an explanatory note for that, then how did the tree of life survive until the book of Revelation? We see the tree of life being alive and well, Revelation 2:7, Revelation 22:2, and Revelation 22:14. Now, before I continue here, let me go back to that explanatory note. All right, this is an explanatory note for when I said, if the flood of Noah completely destroyed the surface of the earth, and then I had proceeded to say, then how did the tree of life survive? But then I also said that it can be scientifically proven that the flood of Noah destroyed the face of the earth, which I say in this explanatory note, them thar are some fighting words, and a lot of people are in heavy debate over this. To many people, this is a seemingly non-ending battle between what has come to be known as creation versus evolution, or creationism versus evolution, and certainly to those who are in between the two categories. But let's talk about the extremist on each side. What I mean is, and besides those who find harmony between those two factions, the Bible and science, I'd like to describe the core understanding and outlook of those two. And to many people, this may be just a very basic understanding, but that's okay because that's not our main topic. And I say that here, but that's okay that it's just a basic understanding, for I need to get into I need not get into much discussion on them in here, for much has already been said concerning them in other books and videos by other writers and commentators. And that's basically creationists who get into the topic of that, like Dr. Ken Ham, and Answers in Genesis and people like that. Now, a creationist usually will take the Bible, especially Protestants with their King James Version, and they will prove that it's not only scientific in specific areas of its text, but that the first few chapters of Genesis actually explain the naturalistic origins of the universe, of the earth, of mankind, the animals, and all the plant life, and etc. An evolutionist, again, these are the extremes of each case, evolutionists will take another entirely different outlook on the origins of life, try to explain it with a total opposite view than what the Bible has to say. In fact, it has become painfully obvious, as ex-law professor Philip E. Johnson had described in some wonderful books of his. I actually contacted Professor Philip Johnson one time when he was living on the earth. Now he's with the Lord. Very nice man. Took the time to discuss these things with me. Anyways, he's got a variety of books on this subject. He's one of the best debaters on this, and I don't mean debate as in fighting, I'm talking about in discussion between evolutionist professors and himself. And he used to be an evolutionist himself until the Lord showed him otherwise. Anyways, as ex-law professor Philip E. Johnson had described in some wonderful books of his, such as Darwin on Trial, InterVarsity Press from 1991, Reason and the Balance, InterVarsity Press Books, 1998, Wedge of Truth, and I've read these books. They're great reading. InterVarsity Press, 2002, Defeating Darwinism by Opening Minds. I love that book. InterVarsity Press, 1997, etc. That many evolutionist leaders have purposely drew up several origin models that specifically and dogmatically turn their views to be as opposite to Christianity as they possibly could, that they could make them. Despite these evolutionist models being in incredible danger of crumbling around their ears for a long time. But the creation model from the scriptures themselves and in comparison with earth sciences lines up more satisfactorily to a lot of folks like myself. And for more information, and I do give that right here, which I'm glad I do, because I didn't know if I did it in this book or not. For more information, look into biblical scientific model, look no further than these men's websites. And I'm going to go ahead and put them up here on the screen for you to look at. We'll start with Dr. Carl Ball at creationevidence.org. Ken Ham, he has both answersingenesis.org and arkencounter.com. He's the one that has that large scale model of the ark that turned it into a museum. Dr. Kent Hovind, 2peter3.com or drdino.com, or even a longer website, Dinosaur Adventure, whatever. Excuse me. Eric Hovind, his son, who lives, I think, in Pensacola, Florida, has creationtoday.org. Dr. Walt Brown, he has a textbook called In the Beginning. Very nice. Creationscience.com. If you go there, he's got his whole text, his book for free to read online. Dr. Henry Morris, ICR.org. Then there's Dr. Dwayne Gish at creation.com. Some of these gentlemen are no longer with us, but their websites are up. Their ministries continue on. And then finally, Ron and Nell Wyatt at ronwyatt.com. Very controversial, amateur, and I say amateur, but not that they're really amateurish, but they're... Ron Wyatt did not have any scientific degrees, and a lot of his findings people don't even give credit to. Even some of these other creation scientists like Ken Ham, I don't think he gives them any credit at all. But fortunately, there was a credentialed scientist who went behind Ron Wyatt and reestablished everything that Ron Wyatt had found. And he come out with a book, Leonard Muller, I believe his name was, has a book called The Exodus Case. I'll put the information up here on the screen, and I highly suggest for a archaeological look. He covers Abraham historically. Ron Wyatt found Joseph's in Egypt historically, along with Moses, who the true Pharaoh was of the Exodus. And this gentleman, Leonard Muller, Dr. Leonard Muller, went behind him and reestablished everything. He went to the actual places where Ron Wyatt went, and in his book he gives Ron Wyatt credit. Again, Ron Wyatt has taken a lot of flack over the years with some of his findings, but like I said, just read this book. It's just wonderful reading.